Well, I'm not sure whether I should say good morning or good night. It's about 2 a.m. During the week. It's a Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and I have decided to come out and do some astrophotography, specifically Milky Way photography. Now, as you can see, the lighting situation here is less than desirable, so I'm going to keep my talking right now to a minimum, and I should have good skies all the way through sunrise, and I'll kind of update you on everything on the back end of the video once I get better light. I need to let my eyes adjust so I can do some shooting, and I'm actually going to use this little camera right here at an attempt to do some time-lapse. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but yeah, it's a rare, very clear night in Ohio, so I've driven out to a very remote place. I'm actually, I know there's some cows in the area, so I have to be very careful about what fields I go into and things like that. But yeah, I'm excited, and got a few locations to check out. Enough waffling. Let me get my eyes adjusted, and let's do this. All right, well, hello on what is now a few days after that awesome little time lapse and sneak peek at some of the photos that I got from that evening. I tried to do an outro right after or in that morning, and I just missed some pieces. And then when I got home and I was editing the photos, I thought, there's a couple of things that I did here that I really wanted to share. And I just wanted to give it a better effort. So this is that better effort now. And what I'm going to begin with is that Osmo Action time-lapse. That's right, that time-lapse that you saw. I know you've seen better ones, but given that it was done from the camera I'm using right now, the DJI Osmo Action, I was pretty happy with it, especially given the lighting. It wasn't a super dark sky, and there were some other things against it. So if you have an Osmo Action, an action camera, you might want to try it for your time lapses. What I did was I set my ISO all the way up to the maximum, 3200, although if I did it again, I might try it 1600. While I wouldn't get the Milky Way and some of those stars quite as good, I think the light pollution and orange there along the bottom would have toned down just a little bit. The other thing I did was I exported just to an MP4 right out of the end at 30 frames a second, and I wished I had gone ahead and also stored off the images of that. By doing that, I could have brought in each one of the individual frames in, or each one of the captures into Lightroom. I probably could have dropped the blacks, brought the whites up, added some clarity, and done some things to have made it look a little bit better, and then later in post stitched all of those individual frames together into a video. So I might try that here and again in future. But again, what I did for that time lapse, ISO 3200, it was the maximum 25-second exposure time, and then I had 3 seconds in between shots. So about every 28 seconds I was getting a shot. That exported out to an MP4 at 4K, 30 frames a second, and then what you just saw and what I'm fixing to show you again, I've slowed down to half speed. Here it goes. All right, so the theme of the rest of this is I'm going to show you an image that I got, and then I'm going to talk about an aspect of having taken it. But before I do that, this little link that should be starting to pop up over here is going to take you to Mike and Chris Perea's video that they recently posted on doing astro, specifically Milky Way photography. Mike went through a very inclusive video from front to back that's really going to give you all of the starting points. He gives through camera settings. He's an Apple guy, so he uses Starry Landscape stacker to do the images. He goes through how to do that, and I even love that he gives you some assistance on getting those foreground or the main landscape techniques as well, or taking that image as well, because that's one of the things that really I still struggle with the most from this point. So what I'm going to do instead of covering that, again, that link that you saw up there, and I'll also put it in the description, I'm going to drift off a little bit into some of the differences that you deal with when you're east of the Mississippi, or in my case in Ohio, and your skies aren't quite as dark, and then there's some other things that kind of pop up with some small differences as well. So here comes an image, maybe two, and then I'll get into some of that stuff. All right, well, the first and most obvious difference that you deal with when doing astro or nighttime photography is light pollution. If you go to look out for dark sky sites, you're going to notice that there's a lot more clear sky, or areas that show up as a 0 and 1 on the Bortle scale when you get west of the Mississippi. East of the Mississippi, we are a lot more populated, a lot more dense, and even when you get remote, it's hard to get remote enough. I'm going to take a pause and launch an app. Okay, so this is an app that I use that helps me scout. I've turned off the location on my phone, and the reason I've done that is because I'm at home. So, no. Anyway, on this app, basically what it does, you can see the scale up in the upper left-hand corner. It goes from light to dark. It's kind of got a color scale there. And what I've found is these green areas, I sort of live in this vicinity between Cincinnati and Columbus. And these green areas fall right in line, especially the dark green areas, with like a Bortle 3.5. And then the light blue is kind of a 3 to 2.5 range. And I really feel like that Bortle 3.5 is probably a good bogey for you to need to at least get the Milky Way in a really crisp, where you don't have to do tons and tons of stacking and editing. I'm not saying it can't be done at lower Bortles, and especially if you have a camera that really handles that high ISO or those dark conditions better, you might have some better luck there as well. But for my experiences, I don't really even try if I'm not in a dark green on this app. Now, I haven't mentioned this app because it's no longer available in the Google Store. It's one that I have, and in truth, it doesn't matter. There's a ton of these type of apps you can use. There's even darksitefinder.com that would let you do it from a PC, or even you can use it on your phone as well. But if I zoom out here, you can see all of the states, and you'll notice that off there to the other side of the Mississippi, see all that clear sky and that darker range? Well, we don't have that out here. We're dealing with all of this. And what I actually just came back from today was scouting in this specific area. So I came in on the northernmost region of these two blue areas, the one both north of Peebles, Ohio, and the one south of Peebles, Ohio. And really what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to shoot from the northernmost rim and into that dark area. And the reason that's a concern is you'll actually see quite far away. Alana was checking out another app that she downloaded because I thought I was wanting to share one today. And one of the things that was built into it was a hazard, or a region, a circle that sort of showed where the horizon would be. And it's amazing how much further you can see out. A couple of things you can do about this: you can get lower elevations, you can get down in the valleys. That's going to help cut out some of the light pollution from those cities. The disadvantage, though, is you're not going to be able to get that Milky Way, the galactic center of the Milky Way, as much because it's too low. You'll get the tail end and you'll get the back, and you certainly get rid of the light pollution, but you miss that quite a bit. If you get real high, you get the big grand vista view. You can see more of the Milky Way as it crosses up over that horizon line. But then you're also getting the light pollution that could be 30, 40, 50 miles away that really lights up the sky. In fact, the images that you're about to see, that's how far away that light actually is. It's lighting up that entire horizon. All right, so another thing you can do if you're wanting to scout, you think you have a location, hit the road, Jack. Gas is cheap right now, and you can still stay pretty socially distant in your car and drive around, do some scouting. I'm going to show you some images over here. Mike talks about it. It's an app I use a lot, Photo Pills. It allows you to do some AR, some altered reality or whatever that sounds like, where you can actually set your location if you're not there, and you can set the time of day. You can look at where the Milky Way is going to be at what time. And the two images that you just saw down the corner were two locations that I actually scouted out today. Right now is a good Milky Way time if it wasn't for all the clouds in the sky. And what I did is I just kind of scrolled along and I said, yep, this is a place. So I saved a Google location so that when there's no clouds, the humidity's good, the weather looks good, and the neighbor's truck goes by. Yeah, so when the humidity's good, all the weather's good, it's go time. You can hit the car, you can get down and get to these locations and be successful at them. Now, I just mentioned clouds, and that's another difference that we deal with out here is the humidity. And this is actually the biggest deterrent to being successful with Milky Way photography, and especially star trails. While I've done some Milky Way shots, you only need 10-15 minutes of clear sky to execute that really well. But what you do need is clear skies for star trails. And I've yet to have an evening where I can have several hours of that to get that full circle star trail that I'm really looking for. So how do you fix that? Well, literally every night I look between photo pills at moon phases, star phases, finding out where the galactic center rises above the horizon line, where it drops, and I'm looking at weather. I'm looking at all kinds of apps for cloud coverage. And when all of the stars, see what I did there? When all the stars align magically, I hit the road. Even in this case, when it was on a Tuesday night, work night, I took a nap and I made it happen. So, shut up. Here's a few more images. All right, one last thing about humidity. This one's pretty cheap and easy, but when you're out all night, or especially around Ohio, our temperature swings quite a bit. It will cross the dew line, and your camera gear and everything out will end up essentially being rained on. So make sure that you've got either a shower cap from a hotel or something to cover your camera, especially if it's not weather sealed. You can buy fancier ones if you want to, that's just fine. But another thing that'll happen is the front element of your lens will actually fog up from that temperature change. You can use a lens hood to help with getting the moisture directly off of it. But another trick is to keep the lens warm. Now, actually make lens warmers that'll fit around your lens and they can keep it warm. But one of the things I do is I just keep a couple hot hands on me, shake, 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 strap them around my lens with a couple of rubber bands. Bob's your uncle, you're good to go. All right, and the last bit that I'm going to talk about is both my successes and failures with lenses. I really don't think it takes much in the way of gear. I think Mike covers settings pretty well. I actually tried his ISO 8000. I normally would use 6400, 62 hike, I don't know, whatever. I tried his ISO 8000. Worked out a little bit better for me with the stacks. My primary go-to and favorite lens is my Tamron 24-70, and that's because it's an f2.8. I almost always use it at 24 millimeters, but the reason it's actually my favorite is because it's still a threaded lens, meaning I can screw on and I can put filters on there. And one of the big reasons that it is because this is like my precious when it comes, that was a Lord of the Rings reference in case you didn't get it there, and if you didn't, seriously, watch some TV. This little filter, it costs you a half a stop. So you can see a little bit of color there. You can actually see over my face in the sky. It does shift the color a little bit. But specifically, this one is a red enhancer. It is a Hoya, not sponsored, a Hoya RA54, and then it says in parentheses red. And what this will actually do for you is it blocks the light frequencies or the light area that is really in those sodium lights, those orangey kind of yellow lights. And that's really awesome. That's where most of the light pollution comes from. And rather than showing you something awesome, what I'm going to do is show you this first image right here. My white balance on my camera was set a little too warm still. I shoot raw so I can correct it later, but what I'm going to show you, this is the first image with my 24mm, and I used that red enhancing filter. So you can kind of see what the sky looks like. That's one of the frames. You've probably already seen the image, but that's one of the frames that I later stacked using Sequitur. I'm a PC guy. That I later stacked. So that's just straight out of the camera, one frame. Now over here, I'm going to switch over to my other lens, which is my Rokinon f2.8 14mm prime. Now I bought this lens specifically for astrophotography. So there's the lens there. Again, my white balance is off, but still my face is going to go away. I'm going to bring both images up now. Side by side you are looking at them, and you can see camera settings are exactly the same. The only difference is one was my 24mm with the f2.8 and the filter, that Hoya filter, and the other is the Rokinon 14mm. And I think you can see quite a difference. And the reason, one of the reasons that I really don't like this lens much anymore is because it doesn't allow for anything to be put across the front of it, at least cheaply. You can get very expensive, kind of slip around the outside, giant filters that are a bear to pack. And the reason I haven't invested any more to use this lens is because, frankly, with that 14mm, it gets so wide and it's such a fisheye that the coma, when it's wide open, is really bad on the outsides, and it's really sort of so soft and the stars get so stretched that I feel like I end up cropping a lot of that out anyway, so much so that I crop it down to close to a 20 to 24mm. On my someday list, I would like to get an f1.8 f2 20mm prime instead, one where I can still screw on, but I'm kind of on the middle of deciding whether I want to change camera bodies, so that one's gonna have to wait. But anyway, if you don't have a red enhancer and you're dealing with light pollution, I would really recommend getting one for night photography. It's also kind of awesome with the fall colors. All right, and the very last thing that I wanted to talk about is stacking. Again, Mike didn't do it in his video. He didn't really need to. I don't know what the options are, how it works when you do any sort of stacking in Starry Landscape, whatever that software that Mike uses in his video. I use Sequitur, however you say it. One of the things that it offers is the dark frames or noise frames, and essentially what you do is you just, whatever your camera settings were for your 10, 15, 20 images, whatever you wanted to take to stack the stars, put your lens cap on, cover your lens, and take the exact same images. What it'll actually do is realize this is where, these are the hot pixels, these are the cool pixels, this is where noise is developing, and it'll go ahead and use that to cancel that out. You can also do a vignette shot, a little more complicated, I've never done that. But it really makes for a very dramatic effect when you have those dark frames. It really helps with the light pollution areas, or when you're kind of dealing with that and you don't have a clean sky. So I highly recommend those. Don't just do them once though. I actually take those dark frames every time I'm out, a couple of times a night, especially if there's been a big temperature or humidity change. Your camera will change enough that it's worth going ahead and getting just, you know, I usually do 5. If I do 10 frames for my stack, I'll do 5 of the noise images. If I do 20, then I'll go ahead and do 10. And I even sometimes will do that while I'm on the move. I don't have a sensor that moves around, so I'll put the cap on, and while I'm moving to a new location, I'm just kind of sitting there hitting the trigger and catching those dark images while I'm out and about. So hopefully these tricks helped. I'm going to hit that time lapse one more time, share these images again. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe, give me a like, double click the alarm bell for bonus points. Really appreciate it, and see you next week. Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye.